Someone mocks you, questions your intelligence, disrespects you right to your face, and before you even realize it, you're reacting. Your chest tightens, your mind races. You say things you regret, sound familiar. Now imagine this: someone tries to humiliate you and you feel nothing, no tension, no urge to prove yourself, just calm. That's not coldness, that's control. Because here's the truth: the louder you get, the weaker you look. The more you react, the easier you are to manipulate, and the more angry you become, the more power you give away. The Stoics knew this. They trained their minds to become unshakable. No insult could break them. No opinion could shake them. Because their strength didn't come from dominance, it came from discipline. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build that same mindset, a way of thinking that turns emotional chaos into total composure, a method for dealing with disrespect without letting it define you. By the end, you'll learn how to walk through fire and stay cool. Let's begin. It doesn't take much, just one sentence, one look, one subtle jab in a crowded room. And suddenly, your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your hands clench. You feel heat rising in your face, and before you even realize it, you've already reacted. You raise your voice, you snap back, you defend, you prove. But later, when the moment passes, there's that sinking feeling. Not of strength, but of shame. I remember one time during a family dinner, someone made a joke about my job. Must be nice to get paid for doing almost nothing. It was meant to be funny, but I felt something in me twist. I bit back, sarcastic and sharp. The room went quiet, and even though I won the moment, I lost something deeper. That's the tricky thing about anger: it disguises itself as power. But it isn't power, it's a transfer of it. See what the Stoics taught, and what modern psychology confirms is this: when you get angry, you give control away. You allow someone else to dictate your internal state. You become reactive, not intentional. And that's not strength. That's vulnerability dressed in armor. Marcus Aurelius said it best: how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. Think about that. Most of the damage isn't from what they said, it's from what you did after they said it. Anger isn't the enemy. It's a signal, a message, a flare from the emotional body telling you something inside still hurts, still fears, still needs to prove. The problem is we often let that signal drive instead of letting it teach. So here's a better approach. Instead of judging yourself for getting angry, start asking, what was I really afraid of in that moment? What part of me felt exposed? What story did I instantly believe was true? When you do that, anger loses its grip. You're no longer controlled by it. You learn from it. That's how power returns. And once you stop chasing power through reaction, you'll start earning respect through presence. Let's talk about that next. Why staying calm earns you more respect than any outburst ever will. We've all seen him, the guy who slams the table in a meeting, raises his voice when challenged, always has to have the last word. He thinks he's commanding respect. But in reality, most people are just quietly waiting for him to leave the room. I used to think being loud meant being strong. In college, I had a professor who was all bark. He'd shut people down, talk over questions, and dominate every discussion. For a while, I was impressed. He owned the room. But over time, something shifted. I started noticing how students avoided speaking up, how no one trusted him with real vulnerability. And eventually, I realized he wasn't leading with strength. He was leading with fear. That kind of respect is hollow. It's compliance, not admiration. There's a difference between people listening to you because they respect your presence, and people tolerating you because they fear your reaction. And here's where Stoicism offers a different model, one that flips the script. True respect isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't chase approval. It radiates, like still water that reflects everything clearly without ever needing to stir. Think of someone you truly respect, not fear, but admire. Chances are, they didn't dominate every conversation. They didn't explode when things didn't go their way. They didn't react impulsively. They listened more than they spoke. And when they did speak, every word landed. There's a quiet strength in composure. It draws people in. Because composure signals certainty. It says, I don't need to prove anything to you because I know who I am. And that kind of energy, it commands the room without raising the volume. So why do we chase the illusion of loud respect? Because we've been taught that to be masculine is to be unshakable, but no one showed us that calm is stronger than force. That silence can carry more weight than shouting. Here's the truth: people may flinch when you're loud, but they only follow you when you're calm. That's the kind of respect that lasts. And the best part, you don't have to wait years to build it. It starts the moment you stop reacting and start reframing. So let's explore that next: how to turn every insult into a window, not a wound. I'll never forget the first time someone called me too soft. It wasn't meant to be constructive, it was a quick dig, said during a group hangout in front of friends. We were debating something light, and I offered a calm opinion. That's when a guy I barely knew laughed and said, "Man, you're too soft to survive the real world." Everyone chuckled. I smiled on the outside, but inside I froze. That comment stuck with me for days. I replayed it, dissected it, tried to figure out how to be less soft, whatever that meant. But then I learned something that changed everything. Insults are rarely about you. They're emotional X-rays, revealing what's happening inside the other person, not what's wrong with you. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "It's not things that upset us, it's our judgment of them." And when it comes to insults, our judgment tends to over-personalize. We hear, "You're too soft," and we don't question the source. We accept it like a diagnosis. But what if, instead of absorbing the words, we paused and examined them? That guy didn't know me. He didn't know my story, my resilience, or the things I'd overcome. His comment said more about his relationship with vulnerability than mine. And this is the practice of reframing, one of the most powerful emotional tools you can carry. Here's how it works: pause instead of reacting. Take a breath. Ask, what might this reveal about them? Are they insecure, competitive, masking fear? Detach, don't absorb the energy, observe it. Let it move past you like smoke. With time, I started hearing criticism differently. "You're too quiet" became "I'm uncomfortable with stillness." "You think you're better than us" became "I feel threatened by your self-respect." "Must be nice to have it easy" became "I'm struggling, and I don't know how to say it." This doesn't mean every insult is harmless. Some hurt deeply. But when you reframe them, you take the sting out. You keep your power. You see more clearly. And most importantly, you grow thicker skin without growing a hard heart. The next time someone tries to cut you down, try this: don't fight back. Don't prove them wrong. Just look at the words like you're reading a medical scan. Because now, you're not the target. You're the interpreter. And when you can do that, you'll stop fearing insults and start learning from them. Now let's move from emotional defense to emotional focus, because the next step is knowing exactly what's worth your energy and what's not. A few years ago, I found myself stuck in a cycle with someone I cared about. Every time we talked, it felt like walking through a minefield. I'd overthink every word, trying not to trigger them. If they were cold, I felt anxious. If they were distant, I blamed myself. And if they didn't reply, I spiraled. It was exhausting because I was trying to manage someone else's emotions while completely losing touch with my own. That's when I stumbled across a line from Epictetus that stopped me coldly. Some things are up to us and some things are not. It sounds simple, but when you really sit with it, it's life-changing. Because most of us live the opposite way. We pour energy into things we can't control: how others feel, what they say, whether they like us, how they interpret us. And we neglect the only thing we do control: our own mind, our own choices, our own peace. Here's a quick way to tell where your focus is. Are you obsessing over what someone might think? Are you replaying conversations, trying to fix how you came across? Are you holding tension because someone hasn't responded? If so, you're leaking power. Quietly daily. The Stoics taught that peace begins where control ends. When we stop trying to bend the outside world to our will and instead take responsibility for how we interpret it, that's when freedom begins. Let me give you a small shift that helped me. I started asking, is this mine? When someone criticized me, is this mine? When someone ghosted me, is this mine? When someone blamed me for their own unhappiness, is this mine? If the answer was no, I let it go. Not out of coldness, but clarity. This isn't about avoiding responsibility. It's about knowing your boundaries. You are responsible for your words, your tone, your intention. You are not responsible for how someone twists them to fit their pain. That relationship I mentioned earlier, it didn't survive, but I did. And more than that, I came out with a deeper understanding of what inner control really looks like. So here's the lessons. When you stop trying to manage the unmanageable, you free up the energy to master what's always been yours, yourself. And once you're no longer chasing control on the outside, you can begin preparing your mind for the inside storms. Because life will throw chaos your way, and the Stoics had a beautiful way of meeting it head-on. Let's explore that next with a practice that turns fear into readiness. Most people wake up hoping for a smooth day. I used to be one of them. I'd roll out of bed and think, please, just let everything go right today. But on the days things didn't go right, someone cut me off in traffic, a friend cancelled last minute, a rude comment slipped through, I felt blindsided, irritated, off balance. Then I came across a strange Stoic practice that flipped my mornings upside down: negative visualization. At first it sounded dark. Why would anyone start the day by imagining bad things happening? But here's what I learned: the Stoics weren't pessimists. They were realists, and deeply compassionate ones. They didn't visualize pain to suffer in advance. They did it to build resilience. They believed that by preparing your mind for the inevitable slights and struggles of life, you strip them of their power when they arrive. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his journal, "Today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, and unsocial. But I won't be harmed by them." He didn't write that because he was bitter. He wrote it because he wanted to remind himself, don't be surprised. Stay anchored. I decided to try it. Every morning, I took 30 seconds to mentally walk through my day. Someone might ignore my message. Someone might be rude during a meeting. Someone might misunderstand my words. And then I'd say, and if that happens, I'll be okay. I'll stay calm. I'll respond with grace. The first week, something subtle shifted. When small annoyances popped up, I didn't flinch, I didn't spiral. I just nodded and moved on. It wasn't that life got easier. It was that I got stronger. That's the power of preparation. Not to live in fear, but to remove the fear of being caught off guard. This practice doesn't make you cynical. It makes you calmly aware. It trains your nervous system to expect challenge and choose presence anyway. Here's a way to start. Before you check your phone each morning, whisper to yourself, today, I might be ignored, misunderstood, judged, or challenged. And I will meet it with stillness. Let that be your armor. Not to shut you down, but to steady you. Because when you expect life to be smooth, every bump feels like a betrayal. But when you expect life to be life, every bump becomes part of the journey. And speaking of steadiness, there's one more thing the Stoics knew that changes everything. It's not just about preparing for conflict. It's about how you respond when the conflict comes. Let's talk next about the surprising power of doing nothing at all. A few months ago, I was at a dinner with some old friends. One of them, half joking but not really, said something sharp. "You've changed, man. Used to be more fun. Now you're all serious and stoic," or whatever. Everyone laughed. I smiled, took a sip of water and said, maybe I just got quieter about what matters. Then we moved on. A few years ago, I would have defended myself, explained my choices, made a joke to smooth things over, maybe even carried that comment home with me, replaying it like a song stuck in my head. But this time, it didn't stick. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I didn't need to respond. That's the thing most people misunderstand about indifference. They think it means not caring. They think it's coldness, distance, detachment. But real indifference, the kind the Stoics practiced, isn't apathy, it's freedom. It's the ability to feel something rising inside you and still choose not to act from it. It's pausing when provoked. It's not needing to win every conversation. It's letting people be wrong about you without losing sleep. There's a quiet power in not reacting. Because most people, when they lash out, are looking for oxygen. They want your fire, your defensiveness, your attention, and when you don't give it, they burn themselves out. I once had a coworker who tried almost daily to bait me. Small digs in meetings, passive-aggressive emails. Early on, I responded. I stood my ground. I tried to clear the air. It always made things worse. Then one day I stopped responding. I didn't match energy. I didn't return tone. I just kept doing the work calmly, steadily. Within a month, he stopped. Because without oxygen, his fire had nowhere to go. That's what indifference does. It disarms without destroying. It protects your peace while preserving your dignity. It doesn't mean nothing gets to you. It means fewer things own you. So the next time someone tries to draw you into chaos, pause, smile, and remember, not every attack deserves a defense. That's not weakness. That's emotional mastery. And it's a skill that gets sharper the more you practice it daily. But how do you train that kind of steady inner strength? It doesn't come from books alone. It comes from discipline, the kind you build quietly when no one's watching. Let's go there next. There was a time when I thought emotional strength was just something you had, like charisma or confidence. Some people were born with it, others weren't. But I've learned something much simpler and more hopeful. Emotional strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build quietly, daily, like muscle. And just like the gym, it's not the heavy moments that shape you most. It's the reps no one sees. The Stoics knew this. To them, philosophy wasn't a thing you thought about. It was a thing you practiced, like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. Marcus Aurelius journaled each morning before ruling an empire. Seneca wrote letters to friends to reflect on his reactions. Epictetus reminded his students that training the mind was like training the body. Small, daily effort mattered more than rare moments of brilliance. So what does that look like for us, modern men trying to stay grounded in a world full of noise? It starts simple. For me, it began with 5 minutes a night. I'd sit with a notebook and ask myself 2 questions. When today did I feel myself starting to lose control? How could I have responded differently? No judgment, no shame, just awareness, and over time something changed. I caught the anger sooner. I paused before replying. I breathed deeper in rooms where I used to feel tense. It's not that I became emotionless. I just became anchored. That's what daily discipline gives you. It doesn't remove your emotions, it regulates them. It gives you space between trigger and response. It trains your nervous system to sit with discomfort without needing to act on it. You can use any tool that works for you: journaling, meditation, cold showers, morning silence, breathwork. It's not about perfection. It's about rhythm, creating small, consistent anchors that remind your system we are safe, we are steady, we choose. Because in moments of chaos, you don't rise to your intentions, you fall to the level of your training. The world isn't going to slow down. People aren't going to stop testing you, but your reactions. Those can become your choice if you've practiced. Now here's the next frontier. Once you've built discipline, you'll start to notice a new internal battle. It's not between anger and peace, it's between ego and truth. And that's where we go next. There was a time when I couldn't walk away from any disagreement, even the small ones. Someone questioned my opinion, I had to prove I was right. Someone challenged my tone, I had to explain my intent. Someone misunderstood me, I'd stay up crafting the perfect reply. But here's the truth I didn't want to admit. It wasn't about clarity, it was about ego. Ego whispers, you have to defend yourself. Ego insists, they can't think that about you. Ego makes everything personal, even when it isn't. And the trap is subtle. Ego wears many disguises. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it feels like self-respect. But deep down it's fear of not being enough without validation. The Stoics warned about this often. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you are just a soul carrying a corpse. Not to depress himself, but to stay humble. To remember that no opinion, no applause, no insult could add or subtract from who he truly was. I saw this play out once with a friend I deeply admire. We were in a group setting, and someone made a sharp, unfair comment about a project he'd led. I braced for his response, ready for a rebuttal, a correction. But he just nodded, smiled, and said, that's one way to look at it. Then he moved on, no sarcasm, no defense, and the room shifted. Suddenly, the person who'd attacked looked insecure, my friend. He looked untouchable. That's when it hit me, ego needs to win. Wisdom doesn't mind being misunderstood, because real strength doesn't come from having the last word. It comes from not needing it. Here's a small practice that's helped me. When you feel the tug to correct, defend, or explain, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this for truth or for ego? If it's ego, let it go, not because you're weak, but because you're finally free. This isn't about being passive. You still stand up for what matters, but you stop wasting energy proving things to people who aren't really listening. And ironically, that's when people start paying attention, because there's something magnetic about someone who doesn't need to be understood to feel secure. So the next time someone misjudges you, breathe, smile, stay grounded. You don't have to prove who you are, you just have to be it. And when you show up that way consistently, you stop reacting and start leading. Let's talk about that next, how calm men command chaotic rooms without ever raising their voice. A few winters ago, I was in a room where everything was falling apart. It was a team meeting. Deadlines had been missed. Tensions were high. People were interrupting, raising voices, blaming. The air felt thick, like it might explode. And in the middle of it all was this one guy, quiet, composed, not saying much. He leaned back slightly, hands folded, breathing steady. When he finally spoke, he didn't shout. He didn't lecture. He just said, let's pause. We're all speaking from stress right now. Let's come back to the facts. The room shifted. That moment stayed with me, not because of what he said, but how he said it. His calm wasn't passive. It was powerful. It redirected the entire energy in the room, and no one questioned it. That's the kind of man I want to be. Because here's something we don't talk about enough. Real leadership isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself so fully, so consistently, that others naturally follow. And in emotionally chaotic spaces, the calmest person becomes the anchor, the reference point, the unshakable presence everyone silently looks to. The Stoics modeled this in everything they did. Marcus Aurelius led during plagues and war, and yet he journaled about stillness, compassion, clarity. He understood composure creates trust. So how do you become that kind of presence? It starts with awareness, noticing when you're being pulled into someone else's storm, recognizing your urge to fix, correct, or win, choosing, instead, to hold space for yourself and others. In practice, it looks like this. Someone lashes out, you breathe. A room gets tense, you stay grounded. A conversation spirals. You ask a calm question instead of offering a heated opinion. It doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you choose when and how and why. People respect that. Not because you dominate the space, but because you elevate it. And the more you live this way, the more magnetic your energy becomes. People feel safer around you. They open up. They listen, they trust. Not because you're perfect, but because you're present. That's what Stoicism gives us. Not just personal peace, but relational power. Because when you stop reacting to everything around you, you start shaping what's within your reach. And in a noisy world, the man who doesn't flinch becomes the one everyone watches. So if you've ever wondered what quiet strength looks like, this is it. And it starts every day with you.